Live. Rick Mooney,
Right.
welcome to the Banter House.
Yes, thank you very much.
Which my
As I
brother my
told you when we first came on, I am here in my COVID casual. This is the way I live these days. So I haven't dressed up for the event, but I'm sure looking forward to talking to you.
that's all good. Um, so how are you? What's your life like during the pandemic at this point? Has it changed much since before?
Oh, yeah, it's changed quite a bit. Not all for the worst, frankly.
Mm,
It happens that we happen to have two houses, one down in the city of Los Angeles, not in the city, it's in a suburb
mm,
called Laverne, and that house is where we lived when both my wife and I were working. It was a place where I traveled down to 3 days a week to teach my own students. But we had also built a house up in the mountains outside of Los Angeles, above San Bernardino, which is intended to be our retirement house.
mm.
So since the lockdown, and since people are not supposed to be seeing everyone in person, and since I am now doing all my lessons on Zoom, I'm living in the mountains full time. It could be worse.
Yeah, it sounds terrible. Actually, it sounds like the
Yeah.
worst, the worst thing. No, that sounds great. Yeah. So how is I mean I've also been teaching online since all this happened. How is that? How is the online stuff going? Do you feel like there's benefits, pros and cons to teaching online versus in person?
There are definite pros and cons. First of all, I will say that I am finding that the Zoom lessons are working a lot better than I thought they would ahead of
Mm,
time.
yeah.
I have never done online teaching for years. Kind of people said, "Do you do Skype lessons?" And I went, "Well, no."
Yeah.
Now we all had to learn new stuff, and so I did Zoom because of advice from a friend of mine who liked it better than Skype,
Mm,
and we got started, and it works very nicely. There are some disadvantages with it. One of the most things that I missed is the idea that I can't actually play duets with my students.
yeah.
That is one of the, as if since you know my books are all written as
Hmm.
duets,
Yeah.
and so I miss the opportunity to play together.
Hmm.
I have a friend I just talked to this weekend who said some technology may be coming that will fix that, and I've asked him to send me some info, and I'll follow up on it.
Yeah, that'd be
But
great.
that's probably the biggest deal, is that I wish I could actually play together with my students. Other things are annoying, like I would be able to talk to my students while they play
Yeah.
and help them to understand what I'm hearing right this minute
Hmm.
and what I want you to do about it right this minute.
Hmm.
And of course, that doesn't work on Zoom either.
Yeah.
When they're playing, they can't hear me. So I've starting to evolve a set of sign language things that allows the students to see what it is I'd like them to pay attention to. Um, um, and it goes on from there. I mean, none of the things are new. One of the things that one of the things that I'm really happy with and that I do a lot with is cello ensembles.
Hmm.
And what with cello ensembles, well, can't do that either. So we're all learning new stuff and it's going new ways. I apologize for the phone. It
It's
will
okay.
stop in a minute.
Don't worry about it. Um.
Um, but it will all learn these things, okay?
Mhm.
And it'll be fine. In
Yeah.
general, I'd like to repeat, I have found Zoom working a lot better than I thought it would when I first got started.
Yeah. Likewise, and like you, I had never taught online lessons before until all this happened, and so all of a sudden it was like tomorrow we're starting online lessons.
That's right.
And it was really difficult. Part of it for me too is, and I think you may have run into this problem is. Zoom is not really set up for, especially for sound processing, especially for instruments. And I have friends who teach violin and who have no problems with it. But I think, especially like on the low end of the cello, I think Zoom thinks it's a truck in the background or something, and it tends to just
Right.
cut that C string out. Um, and I've done some research, and I've come up with a little list of a couple of just cheap USB microphones, 40, $50 a piece, and you don't have to buy an interface or whatever and mic stands and stuff. And I just told people, hey, like, please buy this microphone. And it seems to be very difficult to convince people to do that. Even when I tell them, hey, I can't hear half of what your kid is playing.
Right. No, this is all true. I believe that's true. Zoom was intended initially to be a business meeting, face-to-face kind of talking app. And I actually think they've already made some improvements in terms of the sound. And you can get into the settings. You can turn off the suppress background noise thing. So, if you learned a few settings to do, it'll be right. And yes, I got all my students to go out and buy a microphone. Well, I'm having them buy those cheap little snowball microphones, which are about $60. And I have the one that's above that. I forgot its name. But at any rate, I've got this, which is a notch better than that one, and it's working fine.
Great.
And the only reason I'm working with you on my other system, because I have a really good mic, and I have a mixer, and I have a thing that I used to do for audio recording a lot. And after I interview with you today, I'm going to be talking to Amsterdam on Monday. And we have found that the sound of that mic wasn't quite good enough for this need. So I've set you up with my good microphone and my mixer. So with any luck at all, this will all work out for you.
Well, I wish I could tell you I also set myself up with a good microphone, but this thing is cheap. It's super cheap.
Well, the thing that I liked about it is those microphones were $60 or something, and all of my students went out and bought one.
That's great. That's great.
It wasn't so much money that it was gonna be a problem for them.
Yeah.
And they all went out and got one. And it is, frankly, I'm glad you mentioned it, because it is one of the reasons why I think this is working as well as it's working, is because we're getting decent sound.
Yeah. I have two students who have actually gone out and purchased microphones, and just it's not studio quality, of course, but just I can actually hear their sound, and the problem that I keep running into with especially with students who just won't buy a microphone, is when I hear a weird, like a squeak or an artifact. On the one hand, I want to be like, well, hey, let's address that technically. But then there's a little thing going, wait a minute, is that actually them? Like, are you going to sit here and tell them they made a sound they didn't make, and they're going to be here like, well, this guy doesn't know anything. So it's but once you get those decent microphones working, it's a lot. I feel a lot more confident in sort of addressing, especially sound quality issues.
Yes. Sound quality issues are something that are a bit of a problem. I still have a few students, occasionally the sound just wipes out. And when I look at them playing, I can tell it's not them.
Yeah.
So I just tell them, hey, look, what I'm going to say next is probably not you, but we're always talking about sound anyway. So get down, get deep, make tone, and I'm not even going to talk about what I just heard, because it was the internet and not you.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. One of the things that I found to be really interesting, I'm a huge proponent of practicing in front of a mirror. I've actually got my mirror back there. I practice in front of that thing 90% of the time, probably. And when you're in the studio I used to teach in, I didn't have any mirrors.
Right.
And now it's, this thing, kind of this mirror, or this camera screen thing, kind of it works like a mirror, and so I'm actually in lessons able to get students looking at their video instead of down at their bow, which of course makes the bow angle all crazy, because there's just no point in trying to figure that out.
Oh, absolutely.
From this angle.
I found that too, and I've made use of that too. Because you know what it's like. You're sitting behind the cello. You can't tell how close your bow is to the bridge until you've had a lot of experience. Hence the mirror, right? The mirror, yeah. But right now I say, hey, look at yourself on the screen and see where your bow is and watch it from out there. And so, yes, I've made quite a lot of use of that. And it's been quite useful. And it's also one of the other things, as a slightly aside, one of the other really cool things about Zoom is that I had a virtual recital last May, where we all did it on Zoom. And all my students were there, and they played, and we unmuted each one when it was time for them to play. But they could invite their family members from all over the world to tune in and hear it.
That's awesome. I love that.
And the thing about the past, okay, we had this date, we had this time, we all got together in this room, we had a recital, and it was fine.
Mm-hmm.
But the parents in Korea or Japan or Scandinavia, the grandparents,
Mm-hmm.
they couldn't be there.
Right.
Well, they were there for this,
Yeah.
and that was very nice.
That's a really, really
And
good point.
next month, I'm going to teach in Chicago from home.
Here.
Okay.
Fantastic.
And in April, I'm going to teach in Wyoming
Love it.
from home.
Yeah.
And so there are some things. Yeah, there are challenges,
Mm-hmm.
but there are some things that are actually, this is the thing I've said all along for this whole time. I won't bore you with my whole thought process leading up to it, but the bottom line is nothing's ever going to be the same now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's going to be not the same in certain surprising ways, I think. And we're finding some of them already. Then you find, okay, yeah, it's a bit of a pain in one sense, but gosh, there are some advantages we never thought about in another.
Yeah.
So it's going to work. We're just going to make it happen.
Yeah. I mean, I've honestly considered just, even if pandemic is over, we have whatever that looks like, of just staying with online lessons. I mean, it's, on a little more of a sort of personal practical side, I'm saving so much money not driving everywhere.
Yes.
I don't have to tell people, hey, I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to charge you 50% extra because it's a half an hour to your house.
Yes.
It's like if I'm sitting at home, I've got a less than 30 minutes. Let me go grab a quick snack. I'll warm up for 20 minutes. I can't do that normally. I have to. You have to budget in that drive time, and time is money, and it's time is time. Time is practice time for me mostly. So.
And the other thing is the flexibility of rearranging a schedule when people do not have to drive. Mm-hmm. Right. And when they, so I'm finding there is that as well. I agree with you.
And you're probably a lot more busy as far as teaching than I am. You're much more well. I guarantee you are. Okay,
well, maybe not.
But for me, I've got
maybe not is because I now am calling myself officially semi-retired. I am on my way out. Okay. I'm on my way out. I have done my 6 days of teaching with 50 students, etc. I've been there, done that. I'm over with it.
So again, you're much more busy than I have ever been.
Yeah.
To be fair, I've only really been teaching for about 3 or 4 years. So it's not a long time in the teaching game, but but like for me, I've got all these holes in my schedule I'm trying to fill with students, and now I'm not limited to any particular region or area. I mean, I've been advertising in Colorado, which is where I am, and around the country. And I've gotten, leads from California and New York and Boston and Florida and all these different places. And so it broadens for people like me who need more students. It kind of broadens my range of who I can teach.
Yes.
Which I think is
one of those things we're finding an advantage with among all the changes.
Yeah. So I want to switch conversation to your books, because that's probably what it's what I know you most for. I know you obviously for many different things, but I first was introduced to your name through your books when I was probably 11 or 12, I think, actually. And I've used them to one extent or another ever since then. I was telling you earlier, especially your double stop book. Something I've been focusing on lately is my double stops are trash. So I've been really focusing on double stops, and your books are really helpful in that sense, because they are systematic in a way that I think etudes should be. It's not like here's one etude in second position, but that doesn't really cover all the bases, all the different sort of permutations. But you are able to kind of give students these permutations in a way that's not just dry, play this exercise over and over, but instead using familiar tunes and sort of things they probably already played in the Suzuki books. So what is the process like for you? It's very difficult for me to think this sort of like analytically and sort of these permutations. So, what's the process of writing those books like?
All right. Since you already mentioned to me when we were offline the Starker organized method, let me refer back to it. And it will apply to many other methods. It's very organized, and it is thoughtful and useful and correct. But all of the music in there is too hard for the children that I teach. Basically, all of the music. I heard Starker speak once to teachers. And one of the things he said, for instance, was, we must know at every place on the fingerboard all of the notes that are available to us in that spot. Therefore, he has these exercises where he has his students playing a certain passage of notes on every half step up and down the fingerboard, which is cool, except he's using Beethoven A major. I mean, frankly, you know, my 8-year-old can't deal with that, right? Boccherini Concerto, he just can't.
Yeah.
So what I tell people about this, there are very few things in my books that are new concepts. There are maybe some new concepts, and if we get this far, we can talk about that. But very few are new concepts. They are accepted, widely used, and long used ideas of getting around the instrument. But here's the thing. When the books first started coming out, and people were asking me to come and talk about them, I developed a presentation, and the presentation was called Sink or Swim. And this is based upon my own personal experience on the cello, is that basically you were given stuff that was too hard. You were thrown into the deep end of the pool, and you were expected to either figure it out, at which point in time you were called talented, or you sank. And it's outrageous. It's just outrageous. If I'm considered a good teacher, you know, I don't talk about myself, but I've heard people tell me I'm a good teacher. So fine. If I'm considered a good teacher, part of the reason is I had such terrible teaching when I was young. And for your cellists who are in your audience, I'll give you the one classic example. Squire Tarantella. Wow, like most teenage boys, I just ate that thing up.
Yep.
I just practiced the heck out of it, and I played it at school.
Likewise.
And my teacher must have gone in his head, well, if Tarantellas are cool, the very next piece he gave me was Popper Tarantella, which is a jump of technique.
Oh yeah,
unbelievably far.
It's a quantum
and
leap.
So now that I will admit these days to not being Mr. Practicer, wonderful student. But now that I'm old, and now that I'm kind of old and cranky, I only accept 50% of the blame. Because that man gave me a piece that was totally impossible for me to play, which not only meant I was going to fail, but it meant I actually had no motivation at all to even attempt it.
Yeah. So I studied briefly with Carol Tarr at Denver University. I was doing my master's degree. Yeah, I took 2 quarters of Suzuki pedagogy with her. She's absolutely wonderful. I love Carol Tarr to death. She's such a sweet lady, and she's got it. She knows what she's doing. Oh, she's incredible. I would go so far to say she may be a genius. Okay. She kind of gave me these sort of these books to kind of that are teacher references for book 1 and 2 for Suzuki, and I still go back to them. I mean, they're really incredible. Where's it going with this? Oh yeah, so one of the things that I remember having a conversation with her after a class was, you know, because she was talking about how to move through the books, and she pointed out that like there is no reason to say, well, now we're done with number 1, now we must go to number 2, we cannot go to number 3. It's like that scene from Monty Python and the Holy Grail. Thou must not count
Yeah,
to
yeah,
three
yeah.
unless it first be proceedeth by two. And she was pointing out that, like, listen, if you give a student Twinkle Twinkle Little Star and they come back next week and they're just acing it, maybe you don't need to just force them to do French folk song next. Maybe move them to Allegro or something. Jump ahead a little bit. If they seem to be picking things up pretty quickly. And so that kind of brought up in my head the idea of, well, how do you actually get an idea? Because, like, on the one hand, as you pointed out, you don't want to just saddle a student with something that's too difficult. Like, it's just not true that if you just sit there long enough staring at, name a Popper etude from point zero, that eventually you'll get it. That's just not really the case. But it's also the case that if you are giving students things that are too easy, that aren't challenging, then they're not gonna learn anything, and they're not gonna feel like they have something to do. So it's like, how do you figure out what that middle ground is?
Right.
And that's something that I've struggled with a lot in my own teaching. I feel like I'm getting better at it, but it's really difficult. It's one thing to gauge a student's performance. It's another thing to gauge sort of their level of comprehension and how easily they can assimilate new ideas.
Right. And you're right. One has to strike a balance between the speed. We can come back to that. Let me come back to that in a minute if you want. But let me get back to my books for just a second.
Yeah. Thank you.
Because I decided that my job, remember, sink or swim, they dump you in the deep end of the pool. I decided that, and it was totally unacceptable. Not only was it unacceptable to me as a young teenager, that's completely unacceptable to the children that I am teaching with the Suzuki system, who are 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years old. Completely unacceptable. Concepts are correct. Material is unacceptable, that level. So I decided it was my job to put the shallow end on the pool. That's what I did. So that you start at a place where a kid can handle it, and you walk them step by step into the deep part. And when they get out there to the deep part, when you finally give them a Popper etude, not only can they do it, but they actually like it.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that freaked me out, because I took a lot of my students through these as a test drive, and I gave them a Popper. And they're going, oh, wow, can I do another one? Which was so contrary to my own feeling about the Popper etudes, because they were virtually impossible for me. Okay?
Likewise.
And so the whole idea is to go stepwise, bit by bit by bit, and allow the students to learn a new concept, have enough repetition to master it, and then be able to apply it to the things that you see in the future. So that's basically what I think I did with my books, is I put the shallow end on the pool, and the children then they're successful. This is the thing. One of the things about motivation, because I mentioned it a minute ago, one of the things about motivation is you love to do the things you're good at. And if you're constantly struggling, if it's like the Marines, we're going to beat the shit out of you. Sorry for the language.
Oh, I don't care.
and then maybe you'll come out of it a better man. No, I don't want to teach the cello like that.
Yeah.
If you can help the students become successful, they're going to like it, and they're going to want to do it.
Yeah. One of the things that I struggled with when I was younger, and I actually didn't struggle with it. I started learning from a violinist, and then about 2 years into lessons, I spent 1 year in orchestra without lessons, the second year in orchestra with lessons with the woman who ran the orchestra. Shout out to Michelle Tedder, excellent teacher. And then after that first year, she pretty much told my mom, hey, listen, like, I'm not a cellist. You need to go find him an actual cello teacher. So I ended up taking lessons with, I'm not going to say his name, but a cellist with the Jacksonville Symphony, which is where I grew up in Jacksonville. And he was a hard ass, man. I mean, he was a school of hard knocks. I mean, he would literally yell at me sometimes. And I think it's just my temperament and my personality, but I instead of me going, oh my God, this guy's an asshole, really it made me mad. It pissed me off. And what I wanted to do is I wanted to get better to spite this guy.
Right.
But that I've learned that sort of my response to that kind of hard old school kind of approach to teaching is not really the typical response. Most
No.
people are going to go, I need someone who's going to encourage me and support me and praise me, and I guess
Right.
I just, for some reason, I responded to it differently. Um,
Yeah.
and it's kind of hard in my own teaching to not take that approach, especially with, like, say a kid who's like 16, he's been playing for 7 years, and I teach the same freaking lesson every
Right.
single week, and it's like,
Right.
come on, man, just practice.
Yeah.
Like, um,
Well, there are certainly times when this kind of discussion has to happen. When it's like, look, man, what we're doing here is teamwork.
mhm,
I will give you everything that you need to do, but you know what? You got to go home and do your part if it's going to be successful.
yeah,
And if you're not going to go home and do your part, then this is not going to work.
yeah,
You know,
yeah,
and there's lots of steps. There's lots of steps till you get to the very last one, which is you got to do what I'm going to ask you to do, or we need to just actually stop working together. That's the edge. But on the other side of that, I have very rarely have got to get to that last edge these days. Rarely, because my kids play well. My kids feel good about themselves. My kids feel like they are accomplishing something. They are being successful. They like to do it.
yeah,
And I think this is my experience with the Suzuki system. All right, this is my experience of the Suzuki system talking, which is evident in the stepwise
mhm,
progression in the books that I wrote, is the idea that all children can learn.
yeah,
You don't have to be talented. Now,
yeah.
the
What does that word
last,
even mean?
yeah, I know, the last like 1%, how do you become Jacqueline Dupre? Well, nobody knows,
Well,
right?
speaking about Starker, I mean, his saying was always, the difference between the professional and the amateur is the professional is consistent.
Okay,
But I think that just comes from repetition, and consistency can be learned.
right,
It's not like you're either inherently consistent or you're not. I've been consistent and I've been inconsistent, and then I've been consistent again, and then inconsistent.
right,
It's
right.
consistency is not sort of an innate trait. It's a state of behavior, I think.
And it is a part of the learning process. Um, the Sorry,
That's okay.
annoying.
No worries.
Um, the thing the thing is that if you give children the proper teaching system, they can learn.
Hmm.
And that's what Suzuki came up with. Suzuki came up with what he called the mother tongue method,
Hmm.
where children learn to speak their language. Every person, barring physical disabilities, learns to speak their native language. What in the world is in that teaching technique that makes it so universally successful?
Mm.
And he identified certain specific items that make that work.
Hmm.
And he applied it to his violin teaching.
Yeah.
And therefore, if you do it right, not only do the students learn, but they get engaged in the process and they enjoy it. And again, I keep saying this, when you're successful, you feel good about it and you want to do it more. That's not to say there are not bumps along the road. That's not to say that we're going to be, Hallmark Channel happy for the rest of our lives.
Yeah.
We're going to have to overcome obstacles, but you know what? That's another part of life
Hmm.
that I think we can learn through the study of the cello,
Yeah.
is that we can learn how to overcome obstacles and how to confront the things that are challenges.
Yeah.
And I even heard this once a long, long time ago now. Well, two things that I would say. One is when IBM first got going with computers way back, IBM, they didn't go for the math majors and the computer majors. They didn't even have computer majors. They got music majors.
Really?
They got music majors.
Did not
And
know
it's
that.
because of the creativity
Hmm. Hmm.
and the thinking outside the box part of it. And then the other thing is, I heard that there are other companies that liked the music majors, and it became called as the butt in the chair syndrome. Music majors know how to sit down and get through it
Yeah.
and figure it out, you know? And you put your butt in your chair, you do the work, and it happens. And that's another reason why they like the musicians who have come through this kind of training.
It's a really interesting example because I actually have felt like there is such a interesting, at least in my personal life, just with people that I've known, there seems to be a higher number than I would expect of people who are both musicians and software engineers.
Right.
I went, like, when I was an undergrad, there were 2 people in the program, and this was not a big program, so 2 people out of 20 who were actually computer science majors, and who were like minoring in violin. One of them was violin. One of them was I think they were both violin. And I have an adult student right now who is he actually went to school for music, and then went back to school to get a computer science degree, and now he works at a startup writing code, and he's a brilliant cellist. Actually, he actually went to school for voice, picked up cello about 1.5 years ago, and
Right.
yeah, he's incredible. I mean, we're already working on box suites, and he's just got this mind for it. And you were talking about Suzuki. One of the things that I'm super interested in is, well, it's kind of a weird, it seems like a pretty, I don't know, it seems like a pretty empty question, but kind of just that, like, what is music? Like, why do we even do this? Like, is it species? Like, forget about cello, forget about classical music, whatever. It's like everyone seems to, if you don't do music, you enjoy music, with the exception of perhaps my father. He doesn't listen to music, which is really strange. He does listen to music, but not all the time.
I made that gesture because I'm like that right this minute with my father. I'm not talking to him anymore. So that's the only reason I made that gesture. I hear you and I understand you.
Yeah.
So your question is a really good one, and now we start to get philosophical. Okay, now it starts to get out there a little bit, and I don't go there a lot with people unless we're really, kind of understanding each other. Here's one of the things that I used to say when I was giving parent talks to Suzuki parents who were going to have to accept the role of taking their young children, because they have a big role. That's one of the things about the mother tongue method, is how much a role the parent has in the education. And so we have these meetings. And one of the things that I would say is, okay, there used to be an ad with the US Army. It says, be all you can be. Come into the Army. We will teach you about self-discipline. We will teach you a skill. We will teach you about yourself, and we will teach you how to overcome obstacles, and you can go out into life and be successful. Now, I'm not going to doubt that. That's true. But I'm going to say, gosh, I hope I'm doing something different from the US Army. Coaches will say the same thing. Play on my team. I'm going to yell at you a lot. You're going to work really, really, really hard, and you're going to find out about yourself, and you're going to learn how to survive in the world. That's true too. So what is it that's different about playing the cello? And this is where I start getting difficult, and it's because I call it art. I call art with a capital A, because it's not just cello, it's also dance, it's also opera, it's also, any sort of visual art, right? I believe that art, and I'm gonna apologize in advance to your listeners because I get weird now.
No, please do. I love weird. Please get weird.
Art speaks to your soul. Okay? if there is, I am not a churchgoer. I am not a traditional religious person. Okay. But I do believe there is something here that we feed with art. I feel like um, not only is it possible for certain people to create these wonderful, amazing pieces of beauty, but within every one of us is the ability to see it and recognize it and appreciate it.
Mm.
See? And it speaks to us in a way. And how else does it happen that and different people respond to different things, which is cool, but how does it happen? You listen to a certain thing of music and your hairs start to stand up, right? And you go, oh my God,
So
how can you express that?
yeah, so as far as like not being a churchgoer, people get so I think people not you. I don't think this is not you, but I think people get so caught up with like where this thing comes from, like why is it that we can have these experiences? But I'm not so concerned with where it comes from. I know it exists, and I'm more interested in engaging with that thing than trying to interrogate its origins, because I don't even know if you can have an answer to that.
Well,
I want to kind of disagree with you a little bit on one thing, which is that like you're kind of speaking very generally about like, well, anybody can listen to this thing and have this experience, but I'm a huge metalhead. I love metal. But if I show metal to my parents, they're like, turn that off. Like, I get so much from that music. It does something to me. It's a very similar reaction to listening to classical music, actually.
yeah.
But to my parents, it's just noise. It's just nonsense,
And the other thing happens too. If you got people who are completely uneducated according to classical music, they can't appreciate what they hear and what they see. My mother-in-law is currently out of it. She's 92. She's Alzheimer's. We're keeping her 1 month, and the brother's keeping her the other month. And she did the same thing. I played her the Queen of the Night aria by Mozart, which I consider to be one of the most amazing things ever done. And she goes, well, what does it mean when they go ha 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 ha?
Yeah.
So she's not prepared to accept it. My point, I guess, is that you accept what you can, where you are in your own life. You appreciate what you can appreciate, what you're capable of appreciating.
Yeah.
And with a little bit more education, I mean, let's face it, I don't have a lot of education about something like ballet. But with a little more education, you appreciate more of the nuances, and so on and so on.
Yeah.
I do feel the capability is there, however, and that's why I say it the way I do.
Okay.
And you may have to be educated to a certain point. And me, I'm with you, man. Rage Against the Machine. I ain't gonna do what you tell me. I'm there. I have things that I like to put in my car and drive fast.
Yeah.
I don't know if you follow any of that on the Facebook, but I've got there's one person in particular who has recognized my metalhead tendencies. So we're there, man.
Cool.
I'm with you totally.
Yeah.
And they affect you in a different way, though. See, I'm just all over some of the energy and stuff that goes on in that music, and some of the anger.
Yeah.
Especially when we're dealing with what we're dealing with these days in the world, and one of my favorite lines is, "Well, whatever, never mind." Right? I think Nirvana just nailed it right on the head. Well, never mind. And we get to this feeling of hopelessness, right?
Yeah.
And so all of that appeals to me. But you know what? When I listen to Foray Pieyesu, I go to heaven.
Yeah.
And again, it's an overstatement. I make a distinction between spiritual and being religious. I do not follow a religion. But my goodness, that is unbelievably, exquisitely beautiful.
Yeah.
And it hits me in another way.
Yeah.
While I appreciate and enjoy lots of other things, when we start talking about maybe I should say high art, which here I'll tell you this. There is a guy that I did some study with who worked with a school that I was involved in as the school is trying to find its way and its philosophy. And this guy wrote a paper, and one of the things he did was he defined what he called art music. What that meant was music that you had to approach more than once in order to understand it. And that was cool way he put it, because if you do art music in that way, that doesn't exclude things like jazz, you know, because there's a certain amount of jazz that took me a long time to get into. I don't listen to bebop a lot, but at least I understand it now. And I know what they were trying to accomplish, right? But you can't do that on one listening.
No.
And rock and roll, you're just there. He said his students in high school, when he asked the question, why do you like rock and roll? Because he said, I get it now. So the idea of having art music that maybe carries us into another spot is an interesting idea. I've used that idea a lot as I move forward. Again, the idea, and we maybe talked this out at this point, but my point is that this is one of the things that a person learns from studying classical music, is they learn to get in touch with these things, these inexpressible things that exist within us somewhere, somehow.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm not even going to try to define it, you know, but it's there.
Yeah. Like I said,
So
I'm less interested in where it comes from and more interested in what it is, you know.
Yeah, but the fact is it's there.
Yeah.
Let me reflect back on something you said. You were talking about computer scientists and music and stuff. It is not widely known, but neither is it a secret. I never make it a secret. But it just doesn't get talked about. I don't have a music degree. I have a math degree.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. And the reason that happened was I got to my freshman year in college, and there's stories behind this we don't have to get into, but what I got was the big professor at USC who was a very good player and a very good teacher for people who came to him ready to go. He was not a teacher in the sense that he could fix somebody with problems. And that's what I needed. I needed a teacher that would fix me with my problems. And he basically told me at the end of the first year that he couldn't prepare me for a recital in 4 years and I should seek something else. So I switched over to math because way back then there was no computer science degree. My first computer was the IBM 360, which took up an entire room, and you punched the cards and you handed them to the tech and they ran your job and blah, blah, blah. Okay, that's how old I am. Okay. But the point is, you either took math, you took electrical engineering, and I was not interested in the hardware part, so I took the math part. And so the thing that I like to talk about is people ask me, do you regret having done that? And I go, in fact, no. Oh, I should finish part of the story. When I got to the music minors, I decided I needed to take a unit of cello or I would never pick the thing up again. And it was the best thing I ever did in my life because I got Eleanor Schoenfeld as my teacher, who really can teach, who really fixed me, who really put me on the path of doing things correctly and properly and being successful. So I felt good about it.
Wow.
But beside that, look at how the books go.
Yeah.
They're pretty mathematical, aren't they?
100%. Yeah.
People ask me about that, and you know what? These days I couldn't solve a calculus problem. I don't remember enough of the theorems. Well, I couldn't do it. But math teaches you how to think.
Yeah.
Math teaches you how to put stuff in a row and come up with a solution.
Yeah.
And that's what I learned with math. And that's how I apply it to my books. That's how I apply it to my teaching. So it's that this crossover between music and computer science and all this stuff is always fascinating to me.
The math bit is cool because math was actually my best subject until I went to college, and then I had to take a calculus class, which I was an idiot, and I was so excited to be in music school, and so instead of just taking my first 2 years and just knocking out all of my prerequisites, I was like, well, I really want to take this choral arranging class, so I won't take the math or the history this semester. I'll take I'm really interested in the choral arranging, you know. So then I end up in I was a double major. I did music composition and music theory. I end up in my 5th year, having to take a calculus class, and I was not only preparing a cello recital, I was also preparing a composition recital. I was also on a bunch of people's showcases and recitals. It was a very, very small program, so there was like 3 cellists, and I was the only cello major, so I got asked to do everyone's recital, everyone's recording project for their compositions, blah, blah, blah. And of course I said yes to everything. And so now I'm just so busy, and I am taking this calculus class, and I could have been more disciplined, but I wasn't. That's just a fact of the matter. Shout out to Professor Baker for actually letting me pass that class. Thank you.
Yeah.
Wherever she is. She's not dead. I'm sorry. I shouldn't do this. That's wherever she is.
It's okay.
Until calculus, taking algebra and even pre-calc in high school, it just clicked. It all just made sense for some reason. And there was something I remember having this thought when I was probably like a junior or senior in high school of like, the reason I'm struggling with cello right now is because I'm trying to take this like I'm just trying to hack at it. I'm trying to use a hammer in a place where a hammer's not the right tool. But then I realized I'm thinking totally differently when I sit down and do a math worksheet or something. I'm thinking about, what are the multiple ways I could think about how to solve this, and I'm going to try them until something works. And that was sort of a light bulb moment of like, I need to be able to come up with different ways to approach this problem. This shift sucks. It's out of tune. Okay. Do I just sit there and go all day, or do I come up with something else?
Figure it out.
But then of course I was completely lost because I had no idea how to come up with different techniques, and I think that may be why I'm such an etude nerd, because it's like I have all these tools at my disposal. Like if I want to sit down and practice double stops, I don't just have one book or one approach. I've got your book, I've got the Contreras book, I've got the Starker book, I've got Mog, I've got all these different and they're all different. One's not better than the other or worse than the other. They're just kind of different, and it's sort of this it's almost like a throw shit at the wall until you figure out until something sticks, which I love that approach. It's kind of sloppy, but it's you can end up in a pretty refined sort of toolkit kind of for approaching different problems.
Well, see, here again, you're hitting at the math, and you're hitting at how it teaches you to approach things in a creative way. People think that computer programming, for instance, is a very dry process. And it's not. It's not. It's an incredibly creative process. Computer programmers talk about the elegant solution. They talk about the one, you could crunch, and get stuff done. But if you really come at it a different way, you get this really elegant solution that's streamlined and quick and cool and applicable maybe to other circumstances. If you think about it, it's the same with physics and I don't even understand this part, but the highest level of physics, when we're talking on Einstein and E = mc squared and gravitational theory and stuff like that, we are talking about how the universe works.
Yeah.
Right?
It's so great that you said that. I was literally about to say I was about to say physics. Yeah, one of the things that I've seen across science really, but especially physics. And I've heard this idea from multiple, like Feynman said it, Einstein said it, Krauss has said it, Carl Sagan has said it. Now he's not a physicist, but Lauren Isley has said it, again, not a physicist. But they've all kind of hinted at this thing of like, there seems to be this odd coincidence between things that work and things that are just beautiful.
Yes.
And that you can have this long string, this sort of stereotypical chalkboard filled with equations, and sure, it'll work. But maybe at the bottom of it, there's something that has 5 symbols, you know.
Yeah.
And that's what you know, Einstein believed that the sort of whole sort of this, what was it? What's the name for the theory of everything or whatever? I guess the unified theory of
relativity.
No, it's like it's not
a
thing
the unified
yet.
theory. Yeah,
the unified theory. Yeah. He believed it would be one simple line of math. It wouldn't be this thing that takes up.
Squared.
Yeah. I
mean, seriously.
Yeah.
That's monster. And there it is.
It's incredible.
There's about 6 symbols in that. So no, and you hit it too when you said, what did you say? What did you just say? There is the one that works and the one that's beautiful.
No, that there's a coincidence between what works and what is beautiful. That there seems to be the theory or the sort of way to express something that is the most elegant and the most sophisticated, and in some ways the simplest, ends up being the thing that works the best, which is really interesting. You know.
So we're kind of talking about art on a different level, aren't we?
I don't really know what we're talking about, to be honest. I said I don't really know what we're talking about, to be honest. But
but when we're talking about the elegant, the beautiful solution.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, sorry, I lost my train of thought. I don't know.
It's all right. I mean, and as I said, we're getting out there, and we don't need to pursue this too long, unless we had a little bit more beer. But
yeah.
But the idea is that this is where our humanity lives, I think, is out there on the edge of beauty and creativity. And this is why music and this is why teaching has become such a really huge monster deal for me in my life. It's the avenue that I have pursued in order to kind of approach some of those issues.
Yeah, you know, it's in kind of the same vein of, you know, you saying you've never had you never got a music degree. I never got a teaching degree. You know, I took a semester of, you know, literature and pedagogy in undergrad, and then I took 2 quarters of Suzuki pedagogy with Carol Tarr. But I didn't really ever imagine I'd be a teacher. It just sort of ended up where like I needed money, so I started teaching. And you know, I kind of, in a similar way, I think maybe to your experience with the cello, I kind of just got thrown into it, and I had some sort of tools at my disposal. I had some education, but it was definitely I got kind of thrown in the deep end, to use your analogy. And it's actually been really wonderful, and I've learned to love teaching. You know, I would, to be honest, I would much prefer to have a career as an orchestra musician or something, because that's performing is just kind of the thing that I really like to do the most. But teaching it's been a learning opportunity for me too, because going back to Starker, you know, there's a really interesting video of him, and he's talking about kind of when he first began to teach, and how his approach was just, well, here's how I do it like this. Just watch. Here's how I do it. Just do this. But it's not that simple. And so, you know, having to think sort of on a much deeper, sort of more foundational level about physical motions that I just kind of take for granted has been really, really interesting and difficult. And it's actually taught me something about myself, because as I've sort of examined my technique, I've realized, what I'm doing works, yeah, but maybe it's not the most efficient way. Like once you speak about it, once you talk about it, kind of describe it, you realize it's actually not that efficient. And every once in a while, when I get a little frustrated with students not being able to do something, I switch my cello around and I hold my bow in my left hand and I try to play with my right. And all of a sudden I am completely inept.
You get a sense of what it is they're dealing with.
Yeah.
Virtually every teacher I have ever talked to, because I've done a lot of teacher training with the Suzuki system,
Mm.
virtually every one of them has said, as they have become a better teacher and understood it a little bit better, they've also become a better player themselves.
100%.
You know,
Mhm.
and it's a concept of not only being very specifically aware of what you're doing with your body to make this happen, but how can you communicate it, and what sort of exercises and activities
Mhm.
can you give a young person to help them to experience that for themselves? Because the hardest thing about teaching a musical instrument is you cannot explain it in words. You can I am I'm a very strong advocate of using words, but I call them trigger words. The words themselves do not tell you anything,
Mhm.
but if I can teach a student to do this thing and get this feeling of looseness in the shoulder, connection with their shoulder blades, I can call it bird wings.
Hmm.
And then from then on, anytime I say bird wings, if they're in the middle of the playing and their shoulders are starting to come up, I go bird wings. They go boom, because the word is not the word is the trigger to the feeling,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
the experience that
Mhm.
we have had of doing it properly in the lesson.
Yeah.
So that's the thing about a teacher. A teacher's got to help the student to experience correctly, because you cannot explain it in
Right.
words.
Yeah.
And if you help them experience it and you go,
Mhm.
now,
Mhm.
that is what you do every day at home, and that we're going to call
Whatever.
whatever,
Yeah.
bird wings,
It's
okay?
interesting because I have I use the phrase chicken wing, which I use it in a very
Okay.
different way, which is when you get this thing happening,
Okay, fine.
you know.
Yeah, I mean, the words one uses are almost insignificant.
Oh yeah,
It's
yeah, yeah.
just that among each teacher, it needs to be consistent.
Exactly. Yeah.
But you're absolutely right. If
Yeah.
you've got a thing, a trigger word that hooks into the student's actual physical body experience with it, then the word's highly useful.
Yeah.
I have seen two kinds of lessons that I think are both unsuccessful. One kind of lesson is, I watched a master class once. Student played for the teacher. Teacher talked for 20 minutes and dismissed the student. And I thought that was really stupid. And the other one is, I think music is a language unto itself, and to try to use words to describe it diminishes the richness of the music. Now, that's stupid too, because you know what? We communicate with words. What's wrong with you?
Mhm. Mhm.
And both of those, because the kid would play, the kid would play, the kid would play, the kid finally got what she wanted. She said yes, but nobody knew what the hell it was, because she
Yeah.
was not giving any guidance.
Yeah.
So the thing is, to teachers have got to learn not to talk too much. That's another thing. I hear you,
I
man.
do it all the
It's
time.
another thing, though, that we learn in teacher training. One of the things that's been very cool in the Suzuki system is we make people make videos of their teaching and watch them.
Woo.
And almost all of them
God.
say, I talk too much.
I'm having the same reaction to that thought than when I see the CD of my master's recital and I haven't ever listened to it, and that was 4 years ago, and every time I see it I go I mean I passed, I got my degree, so it must be fine, but
Yes,
so hey Rick, so we're about an hour in. I'd like to take a
I'm
little
fine to
short.
sign off anytime you
No,
want. If we've covered the things you want.
I usually these things go for a couple hours. I have a lot more to ask you about, but I usually take a quick 3 to 5 minute break at this point, so I can go use the bathroom and grab some.
Yeah.
My water bottle's empty.
So you have some other questions you'd like to ask?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Since I've just been my real freewheeling weirdness up until now, I will be happy to talk with you for a little bit while longer. What am I looking at here? Yeah, it's 11 o'clock my time. I
Okay.
could talk to you a little bit longer. I gotta be done. I got some appointments in the afternoon.
Okay. So
But
let's say
let's
maybe
take a break.
11:30 for your time. Is that a good time to stop?
11:30. Yeah, that's fine. I'll come back at 11:30, and we
No,
can and
no, sorry. Let me just stopping at 11:30 is what I mean.
oh, fine.
Is that
Yeah.
okay with you? Okay.
Oh,
I
yeah.
just don't want I want to make sure you're not too late, but I do have to use the bathroom and I need to grab some more water. So,
Okay, and I'm going to go down and I'm going to bring up the power cord for my computer so it
great.
doesn't run out of gas.
Sounds good.
And so I'll see you then when you come back.
Sounds great. We are back. So I think thank you for that entire conversation we just had for like an hour. I think that I don't know. It's like I think these may be unanswered questions or unanswerable questions, but they're still incredibly meaningful to kind of think about. I want to switch tack a little bit. In your bio, it mentions that you traveled to Japan in I think it was 1976. Was that
76.
was that to meet or work with Suzuki?
Yeah,
Wow, how was that?
that was great. Um, there was a lady who lived in Texas whose name I don't remember right this minute. But she used to run yearly tours to Japan in the spring. And people would go, teachers and students. And one of the things they would do is visit their final spring concert, which they held in a sports arena called the Budokan in Tokyo. And literally filled the sports arena up
Wow.
with students, even little kids standing at their seat in the audience part, not just down on the floor part of the stadium. And so there was a part of the tour was a little bit of time up in Matsumoto, which is where Suzuki's headquarters, if you will, were, and then traveling just a little bit, and then hitting the spring concert in Tokyo.
Hmm.
And then I arranged to stay on a little bit longer with a couple of other teachers. My wife was with me on the 2 week tour part, and then she went home with them, and I stayed on longer to watch teaching more. So not only did I see Suzuki teach, but I also watched the founding, if you will, cello teachers of the Suzuki system on cello and what they were doing.
That's incredible.
So yeah, I spent 6 weeks or something doing that.
Wow. What an experience! I mean, I've read Suzuki's
Are you there? Looks
writings.
like we froze.
Oh, sorry. We back?
There, now you're moving.
Cool.
All right.
You're back too. Good.
Yeah. Did you hear the end of what I said?
What was the end of
That
what you said?
at the end of 6 weeks, I was spent 6 weeks, and that was it.
Oh, with the sort of founding cello
Right.
aspect. Yeah,
Right.
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 Yeah. So I've read Suzuki's writings, and I actually am planning on reading Nurtured by Love again sometime soon. He just seems like an incredible guy. I've actually been able to see some videos of him teaching, and one that I remember might even have been, if not, maybe it wasn't that particular concert that you went to, but probably another one, maybe another year. But he's just got this like veritable horde of like 4-year-old students, and some of them have like the wooden fake violins, some of them have real violins, and here's this guy, and he's got this crowd of kids jumping up and down with him and playing tunes, and to the one of them, they look like they are having the best time that they have ever had.
Yep.
And I remember feeling a little bit jealous watching that, because I've had great teachers my whole life, but it feels like after I left my very first teacher I told you about, Michelle Tedder, I feel like at that point it was this very academic, like, let's sit down and do this, and it worked. It's obviously worked for me. I still play the cello, and but it kind of made me go, man, I really wish that I had. It's taken me a really long time to think of the cello as something that's fun,
Right.
and it's
One
always
of the
it's always
things-
been work. It's always been something, and I want to make a distinction between something that I enjoy doing and something that I have fun with, because they're not
Yeah.
quite the same thing.
Oh.
And it's taken me a long time to feel like playing music is fun.
Yes.
Yeah.
One of the things that I keep saying to people that I have to bring up periodically, because we who teach Suzuki and find it highly successful, we have to recognize that good teaching has been going on for hundreds of years.
Yeah.
Right? There is no corner on the market for good teaching just using the Suzuki system.
Right.
But the Suzuki system has done a little bit what I tried to do with my books, which is, one, start out with long understood fundamental successful approaches to the instrument that have been understood for hundreds of years.
Mm-hmm.
But then, number two, bringing it to a level where children can approach it and enjoy it and learn it in maybe smaller steps. The thing being that since I talked to you earlier about the mother tongue method, that how do you learn your language, and how he adapted those things to his violin teaching, one of them is you get started early.
Yeah.
And these days, there are psychological studies that go on that say children learn so much, and before the age of five.
Yeah.
Just think about it,
Yeah.
If you can get started, even if it is with a wooden violin, even if it is with just clapping and jumping up and down, we got Kodai and all kinds of other activities that do that these days with children, and getting them started like this. And you can start way back then, and none of our hundreds of years of successful teaching ever dealt with 5-year-olds. And that's
unless they were prodigies like Mozart, in which case
well,
they didn't really need to be taught.
Yeah, right. And that even then, that was, yeah, you're right. We don't even talk about that because that's like magic. I don't know what that's about.
No, those people are freaks. That's not the average.
Yeah.
That's not the average individual for sure.
But the whole idea of Suzuki was a very, very fun, kind, generous, charismatic person. And you're right. He stood in front of a group of little kids, and they'd have the great time. And to us again, if you're a 5-year-old, who cares if you're actually playing a song right now? We're learning a fundamental issue, even if it's only how to keep rhythm by jumping. We're learning a fundamental thing, and we're having fun doing it. And when we have fun doing it, we want to keep doing it.
Yeah.
And then on it goes.
Yeah. Yeah, this kind of goes back to what I was talking about earlier with the issue of finding a balance between how much do you challenge a student, and yeah, one of the things that I'm struggling with the most in my teaching right now is I keep coming away from lessons going, okay, sure, granted that obviously this kid hasn't practiced since a month ago, but I probably could have made that a lot more fun for both of us.
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't know. It's difficult for me to do that.
Look, number one, we're all learning how to be better teachers. Okay? I'm still learning how to be a better teacher. I've been doing it for 50 years. Okay? I'm still learning how to be a better teacher. One of the things that Margaret Rowell used to say, because I learned a lot from her as well. Margaret Rowell, people say, don't you get tired of teaching the same stuff over and over again? And she goes, no, I'm not teaching the cello. I'm teaching the person. Mm. And every person that's in front of me is a different person and creates a whole different sort of challenge as to what's going on. The Suzuki Association of the Americas, I'm going to put a little plug here, has developed quite a very thorough and worthwhile system of teacher training. Mm-hmm. I have told people, I don't care if you want to be a Suzuki teacher or not. It really doesn't matter to me. But you should take that training, because what that does is it teaches you how to put things in an order and how to present it to students and how to help make the students be successful at what they're doing. And then you can teach whatever repertoire, who cares?
Do you think that
apart from a university level actual pedagogical degree, you're not going to get it anyplace else. Mm. When I was at USC, the music education degree was a joke. You learned how to teach in a public school. That's what they did, and you had to play clarinet for one semester and blah blah blah. Yeah. You didn't learn anything about teaching.
Well, I want to plug one of my alma maters as a bit of an exception to that, which is Denver University. Fine. Having Carol Tarr there, I mean, it's not a pedagogy degree. It is a Suzuki pedagogy degree, and part of that degree is doing the teacher training.
Fine. And here again, I totally agree with you. There was another fabulous program in Austin that Phyllis Young used to run.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Real good time teaching. How to teach. Yeah. Okay, so I made a broad statement. I'm fully aware.
But
fully aware.
It was broad, but it's an accurate generalization. Right. I just wanted to, because I love Carol Tarr to death. She's one of my favorite people.
Totally
I just want to put her out there.
But one of the things that I wanted to tell you is we have developed with the Suzuki Association a course that is called Suzuki Principles in Action. And there are some prerequisites for that course. We abbreviate it as SPA, Suzuki Principles in Action. And there are prerequisites for that course, but you hit something that makes me want to say this. We have a section in that course that we call the teaching segment. The teaching segment. And it is one of the things that's in this course is how do you structure a lesson and how do you organize it for most success. And the teaching segment is defined as the time where you figure out what you want to change, and the time you spend incorporating that and teaching the student about that change. And helping them to become successful with that change. And then it becomes a homework assignment. In other words, as I alluded to earlier, in the teaching segment, the definition is the student is successful in the lesson at the thing you want them to do. So that when they go home, they'll do it right. One of the things that we have to learn as teachers is how much to give them in a jump. The thing you got to do is give them enough to challenge them. This is what I'm reacting to. Your idea that you don't want to bore them, right? You don't want to just do the same thing over and over again.
Yeah.
You got to give them something to challenge them. But you got to know how much challenge that they can actually accomplish. So yeah, we're going to stretch this far, but I'm going to teach you how to get there. And then you're going to get there and you will feel good about the fact that you have accomplished a new thing. And we will have done it enough time in lesson that when you go home, we know it's going to be right. And in that way, step by step, you challenge them just enough to expand their horizons, but allow them to be successful.
Now, is this aimed at specifically music teachers, or do you think that this approach can be done to teach any other subject? Like,
oh, I think it could be done with any number of subjects. Honestly, it happens to be geared toward music. But I think the concepts that are beyond what I'm trying to say, beneath them, the underlying concepts are very much the same, you know? And if we go back to mother tongue method, just to use a ridiculous example, you know, one of the things that they talk about, that Suzuki talked about in the mother tongue method, was the way that you gave the students only enough that they could do. Mama, oh man, isn't that cool? Mama, listen to you. Isn't that great? Now let's try supercalifragilisticexpialidocious, right? You know, nobody does that crap. Nobody.
Right. So
in any field.
And then the reaction, like when you, obviously I don't have kids, so whatever. But like, you know, when I assume most parents, when their kid starts to speak and they start to point at things and go, you know, cup, and the kid goes, ka. You don't go, no, it's cup. Say cup.
Exactly.
Cup. You know, you go,
come on, enunciate, kid.
Yeah, right.
Enunciate clearly.
What's wrong with you? You know,
right.
How dare you? You're 18 months old. Come on. At this point, you know,
right.
Yeah, and it's like you don't respond with anger or sort of this sort of judgmental, like, how come you can't do this? But you just kind of laugh it off and you do the thing again and again and again, and eventually they sort of get it.
In this way, the effort gets praised. Okay? This
effort, not result,
is
right?
Important. If you're not going to be happy on the cello until you can play Dvorak concerto perfectly, you're going to be a miserable person.
I would not be happy right now, for sure.
Yep. And so the perfection at the end is not the goal. It's the process. And we praise the process. And you get engaged in, wow, you know, step by step. Whether it's successful instantaneously or not,
right.
You engage them in how to learn. And this is another way that music study can transfer over into real life, into other parts of life, in terms of, yeah, okay, fine, I don't have to get this right today, but I'm going to enjoy the process and I'm going to get there.
I tell my students a lot, especially when I see them getting frustrated with something that they've been genuinely practicing and just can't seem to get or understand or grasp. I tell them, you know, I think the reason maybe I wouldn't tell a 9-year-old this, but I might tell a 13 or 14 or 15-year-old this. I think I would tell them, you know, the reason that you're frustrated is because you're attached to the result. And what I want you to do is I want you to let go of the result, focus on the process, have a little bit of intention, and then and then see how quickly those results come. They may not actually come quicker. It may just be because you're not focusing on the time between the effort and the result. But it seems very quick. But again, have some intention, focus on the process, enjoy the process of creating and of playing. There's a reason there may be a reason we call it playing that's not just sort of coincidental. Like it may actually be something related to actual play. I don't really know that that's true, but and it's difficult for me to say that, though, because I am very, very attached to results in my own practice.
Right.
Because if I'm going to sit down for 2 or 3 or even 4 hours, I want to have something to show after it.
Right.
Even if it's a little bit, I can do this shift more consistently. And I want to have something to show. But I'm 28. I've been playing for 18 years. I've got a master's degree. It's a little bit different than a 13-year-old who likes the cello because 2 cellos is super cool.
Yeah. Nonetheless, you got to set the proper goal.
Right.
Okay. You really do. One, I don't mean you, I mean one, must set the proper goal.
Yeah, I understand.
And I did this in my own personal experience. Suzuki talks about a thing. It's a little bit of a side story, and I don't want to make it too long. But
Take as much
Suzuki
time as you need.
talks about doing something 10,000 times.
Yeah.
And we are talking about how to master something. And this, again, has been supported in recent years with actual studies where children were studied who were excelling at math and at sports and at music, and they were analyzed about what it was that they did. And so there were lots of things along of the way, but one of the points was 10 years of commitment to the task. Okay? Right? So when you get a new student and says, "Oh, we're going to try the cello for 6 weeks and see how it goes," no. Okay? So Suzuki talked about 10,000 times, and you have to be careful what you do 10,000 times. But for instance, he had an exercise making a little circle with the tip of the bow.
Isn't it specifically knowledge plus 10,000 times? I think that's the saying, right?
Well, that's what he's saying. Is that ability is knowledge plus 10,000 times.
Yeah.
Because head knowledge is fine, but head knowledge is worthless unless you can put it in action.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So, and then we have this in the SPA course as well. On the one hand, you got the person who has this amazing concept of what they want to do, but they don't have the chops to make it happen. On the other hand, you got the person who will sit in the back of the orchestra playing Paganini, and it sounds like crap because they have no concept about the music involved. Right?
I just want to make a side note. If anybody happens to listen to this at any point who is a music major, do not play your concerto while you're sitting in orchestra class waiting for the conductor to show up. Don't do it. Practice your orchestra music. No one wants to hear you play Paganini or Beethoven or whatever the hell else you're playing. No one wants to hear it. Freshmen, don't do this.
Yeah.
Well, Rick, sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
But so let me think. I was on a way. I was just going to tell you that I actually did something 10,000 times.
You counted?
Counted.
Wow.
I made hash marks. And it was 2 notes. I was missing the 2 notes at the beginning of the third movement of the Francoeur E major sonata. E, B, dum, do, yum, bum. I was missing it. And so I finally said, okay, now we're going to put our money where our mouth is. I'm going to do it 10,000 times. I started out 100 times a day, redid the math, figured out my recital was going to be over. Therefore, I did 500 times a day. And I didn't do it all at once. I did it 25 times and break, 25 times and break. After 100, I did something else and came back because I was preparing a whole recital, so I had plenty of material to practice. But E, I can't hear it in my head. I don't have perfect pitches. E. This one. Okay, this one.
Cool. I'm getting flashbacks to
yeah.
So it's a grad school.
The point being, what you were saying is you set a goal, all right? And it's 2 notes for me. It's 2 notes. And guess what? Top of the second page, Saint-Saëns Concerto, it's a B. Boom. I knew it.
Yeah.
It was there. See? So the idea, again, is the process. This is what we've just been talking about. Is the process. You get engaged in the process. You set goals that are achievable, and you go for it. If the goal is perfection, if the goal is out there too far, you spend your life in frustration. But if you can set a goal that you can see and work toward and achieve, then the process becomes rewarding in and of itself. All right, so
that's Rick. Thank you. I love that so much. I know you have an appointment to get to, and I think this is probably a really good place to end this. Rick, thank you so much. I've admired your work for a really long time, and I can't believe how easy it was to convince you to talk to me. This has been really incredible, and I have a lot to think about, and I really hope we can keep in touch. I've learned a lot from you today, and like I
Great.
said, I have a lot to think about. So,
Well, thanks for the invitation. And one of the things that I try to do is I try to be accessible. I admire Yo-Yo Ma so much for the fact that as busy and famous as he is, he always takes time.
yeah.
He always takes time to interact with people and to be real and to be genuine. And so I would like to kind of take that model and be that way. So yeah, I'm very happy to talk to people. And so just let me know. You want to do something else, especially if you got particular specific issues you want to talk about.
Well, this
Just
this
let
this
me know.
conversation has brought up a lot of new particulars that I hadn't thought about before, and so I would love to do this again with you at some point, and talk about some of the things we didn't get to talk about today. But yeah, this has been really, really incredible. I thank you so much.
Great.
Thanks.
Fine.
All right.
See you
So
later.
Rick Mooney, everybody, and we are